kick this off tonight. We are the guys from Loot Shooter Weekly. I'm gamertag Burt Reynolds. With me tonight, as usual, the golden voice of gaming, Negan Killjoy. Ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, Burt. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, Negan. How about yourself?
Doing well. You know, it is Saturday, so that means gotta do a little robot dancing on Saturday night. Whoop, whoop, whoop. But no, it's all good. It's all good. Having a good weekend so far. So I'm looking forward to the final day of the weekend and all that good stuff. So there we go.
And it is. It's Saturday night, and this is not an official episode of Loot Shooter Weekly. We're actually reshooting. We had technical difficulties with the build video we did a week and a couple days ago, which was a Thursday night. So we're redoing it, and we're gonna talk about a build tonight that is an Amara build in Borderlands 3. And I'm gonna save that for a minute. We're gonna talk about. We are gonna, I think, have a couple drinks on stream tonight.
Absolutely should, man. It's Saturday night. Gotta have a drink.
Saturday night. So I'm gonna do a cider tonight and not a beer. I'm doing, per your recommendation. Nice. I was trying to go get the Cosmic Crisp cider that you had talked about on stream. Maybe it was during this. I don't remember.
It was last time we did this one.
Right. And they don't have that here in Chicago, but they did have the same company, Two Towns Cider House, had their Bright Cider, which is a made with Newton Pippin's green can. And so I'm going to try that tonight because I have not had a cider in years, man. But I'm going to give that a roll, see how it is. How about you, Negan? What are you doing for refreshment this evening?
Well, my refreshment this evening, I am going to head into Livermore wine country, actually, and there's a brewery in Livermore called Shadow Puppet Brewing Company, and I'm doing what they called Over the Rubicon Blonde Ale. So I'm traveling, and I'm going to be off-roading a little bit. A bright, refreshing, and flavorful blonde ale crafted with Julius and Galena hops, lending this beer pleasing notes of mandarin and peach. This beer is a real thirst quencher on a hot day. So yeah, relax, indulge, repeat is their call to their tagline. So
nice.
That's what I'm looking forward to. Looking forward to refreshing, nice refreshing blonde ale.
Same here. I'm going for refreshing with that cider. Crisp, refreshing.
Absolutely.
It's very hot here. I know it's well, it's all relative, right? When you say it's cold, when you say it's cold by you, you mean 50 degrees. When I say it's cold by me, I mean negative 20 degrees.
Negative 20. That's right.
When you say it's hot by you, you mean like 105, and when I say it's hot by me, I mean like 92.
Yes.
It's hot here, like 90s or low 90s. And I think it's been hot by you too, right? Like relatively.
Actually, the last couple of days been probably 80s or so like that. So it's been kind of nice. It's been actually kind of refreshing. But yeah, last weekend it got up to 100 and stuff like that. So summer's coming, man. Summer's coming around the corner and gonna hit us really hot and ready to go for it.
Yeah, there you go. Well, without further ado, we don't want to. We're gonna detail a build tonight. So we're not gonna
do it.
We're not gonna talk about the rest of the loot shooter genre or anything else. We're going to talk about this build. Again, we're in Borderlands 3, and we're gonna work with Amara tonight. You may recognize the name, 1.21 gigawatts, the amount of electricity required to get the flux capacitor in the DeLorean to cause time travel. All about electricity. This Amara build is all about electricity as well. And so I'm going to get into what are the gear items in this build, then we'll go and look at the skill tree, and I'll talk about some variations that can be done with it.
And so the first one you're going to talk about, and again, the strategy around this one was mobbing, bossing, or was it a little bit of both, or what was your strategy as you were coming up with this build?
So it does both, and I guess the strategy is there's a shield that got released with the latest DLC called the Revolter. And I think, let me read what its exact words are, but it says, on depleted, become shock and rage for 15 seconds, which is like a 200% shock damage buff.
That's a buff.
That's a buff. Yeah. So, and Amara, normally her default elemental, Amara's the elemental character in this game. And her default element is shock, but you can change that to fire, corrosive, or cryo. And because the shield is going to give me all the shock damage I need, it allows me to run a different elemental damage as my primary damage on her, which is cool. And so the kind of thought process there was, what could I do to maximize all elemental damage in this build, since I'm getting all of that 200% shock damage? And could I keep that 200% shock damage up basically 100% of the time? 100% uptime, or as close as possible. Knowing that that would be very strong, and she has several other things within her skill tree that help enhance elemental damage, and so that kind of elemental damage is only going to get amplified in a build utilizing Amara.
Right. So since Revolter adds 200% damage with shock, why not just go 100% and just buy into... Why go other elements? Why not buy into shock all the way?
Yeah, that's a great question, Negan. So the way in all loot shooters that they calculate damage is there's additive damage, there's multiplicative damage. And so adding additional shock damage is additive, and adding other kinds of damage is multiplicative. And the bigger the multipliers, the bigger the damage numbers, the little numbers that pop off the guys when you shoot them. It's always kind of funny how these games work, right? You get little numbers above their heads. So it's better to go with something that's multiplicative. So some of the other multipliers that we can come up with, and you'll see this in the build, splash damage. That's going to be a multiplier. Other elemental damage, multiplier. Gun damage, raw gun damage, multiplier. Critical hit damage, multiplier, etc. Like that. So we want to get as many of them going as we can at once. And as an added bonus, when you're playing in group play, as you've experienced when I'm playing this build, the more elements I get going, the more easily it is to see all the other enemies, because they have a whole bunch of different colored numbers coming off their heads. I'm not really sure why you're creeping towards me with your ion cannon, but that is super, super scary looking. Anyway. Very distracting.
Sorry about that. Go ahead. All right, there we go. We'll put that down. There we go.
All right, so we're gonna get into the build, and I'm gonna go first through the gear that we're gonna utilize, and there's a whole bunch of different options here. So by no means should you think that these are the only options. These are just some of the options. But the basic anointments that we're going to be looking for on guns are either going to be ASE next to mags or ASE splash 200. The point of that is the fact that we are going to be in after action skill or action skill end basically all the time. You could run consecutive hits if that's all you have. That's just going to give you additional raw gun damage, but you'll see we're running a Pearl, so that's going to give us quite a bit of additional gun damage. And so the consecutive hits is just going to be kind of overkill. Not every gun rolls with ASE splash damage. It has to already do splash damage. So if you're running splash damage guns, I would make the argument that ASE splash 200 is probably your best bet as far as anointments go. But if it's on a gun where that's not available, then you run the next two mags of a certain type of element. Now again, the elements that we are going to have in play here at all times, we are going to have shock. We are going to have cryo, because that's what I have her skill tree set to. And we're using something called the skill called conflux that we'll take a look at when we look at the skill tree and at the comm. And they are going to allow us to have a percentage chance, a very high percentage chance, for each and every round that gets fired to cause enemies to be melted, which is corrosive, ignite, which is fire, or electrocuted, which of course is shock. So the damage we're going to be missing is radiation, but we're going to have that on our grenade with an ASE. So in essence, we're going to have all the elements. So it's really about what element next to mags do you want to enhance the most. If you're fighting robots, probably corrosive. If you're fighting human enemies, it's probably incendiary, so on and so forth.
Totally makes sense up to this point.
We're going to start tonight with the first gun, which is going to be pistol, the Free Radical. This is also a newish weapon. This one is very, very strong. You can see this is about 80,000 damage. It's got a decent fire rate. Here, there's not the splash anointment, so we have the action skill end next to magazines will have additional bonus corrosive damage. That's, again, going to be good against robots. It does all right against people. It basically takes armor off. Anything that has a yellow bar, it's going to take that off. You could also run the Hornet. You can see that. Or the Beacon. The Beacon would be also another excellent choice. At the second slot, I'm going to run an SMG. There's a whole bunch of different options here. Again, now this time I have the plasma coil, and this one does roll with splash damage, so it does have a splash damage anointment. The plasma coil is ridiculously strong, but I could run the Torrent or the Kybe's Worth, which just recently got a buff. I could run a Smog. There's, Flipper. There's just a whole bunch of different great SMGs in this game. Any of those would work. I chose to be running the plasma coil this time around. In the third slot, I'm running the Becca, the Deadeye Becca. This is a Jacobs assault rifle. Of course, does not roll with splash damage anointments because it does not do splash damage. This gun just really recently got a buff, I think actually since we did our video. So I put it on tonight.
I was going to say this is a new gun to the build.
Yeah. Yeah, and the reason is it's just very, very strong. And we're fighting human enemies here, and so the next two mags here I have incendiary damage. This is fun gun. It's got a really good critical hit multiplier on it. It's very strong because it's Jacobs, and Jacobs do good in crits, and so that's why I chose that one. But again, you could run Rebound, you could run Soul Render. The Chaos, I think, is what I was running last time, and that's a very fun gun to run in this build. You could run Juliet's Dazzle. You could run some shotguns, like the Reflux. You could run the Trevinator. That's also an excellent option. The main gun we're going to use in this build is actually the Complex Root. And that is a sniper rifle. It comes from Malawan. It basically sends out what looks like a swarm of bees above the head of enemies. And you'll see in the skill tree that we have some skills that actually enhance that. And it's going to cause little, because we're doing splash damage, and you can see it has a splash damage anointment, it's going to cause little, almost like firework pops. This one kind of reminds me of Ricochet Witch, the old Moxie build, where he was running, what is that gun? I think I had it on here. I have one on here? I don't remember. The gun that rebounded a whole bunch of different, little pucks. I don't remember the name of that shotgun now, but it's kind of like that. It's going to ricochet a lot, and when it ricochets, it's going to cause a lot of damage. This one's going to hit basically all the enemies on the map all at once. The trick with this is, and this is why we're running cryo on our skill tree, is that if you are running other elements other than cryo in your skill tree, you're going to actually hurt yourself with this gun. Because this gun, every so many shots, shoots something back at you, but it shoots it back at you in your action skill element, and in this case, if we have on cryo, all it's going to do is slow us down a little bit. Again, you could be running Sandhawk here, you could run launchers here, you could run a different shotgun here, again, like the Redline. There's a whole bunch of different options. This one I just find to be the most fun. It's a lot of fun in mobbing. It does a lot of damage. So those are our guns, and we'll see how those perform in a minute. The key to this whole build comes in the shield, and this is the Pack Rat Revolter. Again, on depleted, you become shock enraged for 15 seconds. Shock enraged is code for 200% shock damage. I have this one. This has an on-action skill start. Activate any effects that trigger on shield break or fill. So every time I grasp an enemy, it's going to act as if my shield's been broken. It's going to give me that 200% damage buff, shock damage buff for 15 seconds, and I will have my action skill back before that 15 seconds is up. So basically 100% uptime on this one, which is awesome.
Nice.
Next up, we have the recurring Hex. I have it in shock damage because that 200% shock damage, buff, I'm doing all this other shock damage. It just, again, it helps. The Hex only comes in, I think, 3 elements: cryo, radiation, and shock. I just chose to go with shock, but the anointment on this is on action skill end, which again, it's going to be ending very regularly. We get 50% bonus radiation. That was our missing element for 10 seconds. We are running a Pearl of Ineffable Knowledge. This is going to give us our bonus gun damage, fire rate, and mag size. So this thing stacks up to, I think it's 90% damage. Yeah, it says it right there, 90% damage. And then you get an additional 16% above and beyond that, which is actually a multiplicative 16%. So it's a very good extra little bit of damage buff because it's multiplicative. And finally, as we move towards the skill tree, I'm going to talk about my comm. I'm running a Phase Zerker comm here. This is going to basically give me max rush stacks. They decay over time. I gain weapon damage here and action skill cooldown rate based on the number of rush stacks. So again, max rush stacks of 5, I get them instantly. I have splash damage, weapon damage, and action skill cooldown rate. Again, because I'm trying to have my action skill up all the time. So that is all the gear. And then I'm going to move over and look at the skill tree.
All right. So far, so good. So far, making sense. You got a lot of synergy going with the different gear and stuff, so looks good.
Yeah. So when we get over here, we're going to start in the blue tree. This is going to go all the way down in the blue tree and all the way down the red tree and partway down the purple tree. I have 5 into do harm. This is for stacks of rush consumed. Amara's action skill damage is temporarily increased. That means the ties that bind that I'm running are going to be increased. You could also run this with phase cast, and if you run it with phase cast, then you'd want to run phase cast weapons instead. But you could run it with phase cast. We're going to run it with ties that bind tonight because you get your action skill back a little bit faster. And I just like ties that bind.
Right. Oh, okay. So that's a personal option. And so I was going to ask what the difference or what the advantage of phase cast would that be?
The advantage of phase cast is you're more single target focused in your damage.
Okay.
This is going to be more mob focused, although you'll see that we're not going to have any problem bossing with this build, even with phase cast or phase grasp on ties that bind on. Violent Tapestry. This is going to give, anytime we apply a status effect, we gain a stack of rush. For every stack of rush that we consume, our status effect chance, meaning the chance that we apply status effects to an enemy like fire, shock, corrosive, melt, all those, that much higher that we will apply the status effect to them. So, valuable because we want to apply all the status effects all at once. Because if we do apply all the status effects at once, we get a 25% weapon damage buff coming out of our Guardian rank tree. I think it's called Harmageddon. Yes, Harmageddon. So each status effect you apply, you get 5% more damage. We want to apply them all, which would be 25%. Well, we're also going to use Alacrity. This gives us reload speed. Transcend gives us accuracy and critical hit damage. Restless is going to speed up our action skill cooldown. We max that out because, again, we want our action skill up 100% of the time. This Ascendant just basically makes all of our current action skill augments. So in this case, we've got Stillness of Mind. It makes it that much stronger. Stillness of Mind is really our only source of healing here, by the way, in this build. Laid Bare, this is going to help us mob. It basically increases the damage across enemies that are grasped together in the ties that bind. Wrath is additional gun damage. We get 20% all the time and 20% additional after skill use, which again, basically 100% of the time we're going to have that because we're going to have our skills up constantly. We did put 1 point into the Remnant Orb. The Remnant Orb does a lot of damage. Even after it's been nerfed, it still does a ton of damage. And Avatar allows us to use our action skill twice per cooldown, basically. We move over to the red tree. We've got Anima. This is going to give us status effect damage. It's going to give us status effect duration. And it's going to give us action skill status effect damage. So this is actually going to help us freeze enemies because, again, our action skill status effect is actually cryo. And it's going to cause all those different statuses that we apply to enemies to do additional damage to them. Steady Hands is going to give us handling and accuracy. Infusion is actually going to let us convert a portion of our weapon damage over to our action skill element. This allows guns that are non-elemental to still do elemental damage. Guns like the Becca, for example, which are just kinetic. Tempest, we put 5 out of 5 here. We deal increased elemental damage, and our shock damage is even further enhanced. Again, I mentioned earlier, there are things in our skill tree that are going to help enhance that Revolter even beyond how good it is already. We have 1 into Wildfire. This allows status effects to spread from enemy to enemy. Dread is going to give us gun damage after we've grasped enemies. We're grasping enemies a lot, so we're going to have that damage a lot.
So for mobbing purposes, why didn't you put more into Wildfire? Why did you only put 1 into Wildfire?
Because the spread chance is based on bullets. And 8% means that, about every 10 bullets you shoot, you're guaranteed to get a spread.
Gotcha.
And how fast the guns fire in this game, it happens a lot, right? So you don't need to... Going any further into that doesn't really enhance it.
Diminishing returns. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. You see that in a lot of these, especially Amara's skill tree. I find it's like there's a lot of it's chance-based stuff, and there's enough chance because of how fast we deal out bullets, or in this case, like projectiles, like something like the root. Each projectile, right, counts as a chance. Indiscriminate. This is actually the one, speaking of the root, that's going to enhance the root. So anything that ricochets. Every gun has a chance of ricochet here. Things that already have a whole bunch of projectiles are already ricochet are going to ricochet even more. And it basically just means you get a whole bunch of these little swarming bees. That's what the root does anyway, but it just further enhances that. Deep Well gives us mag size. Sustainment is a little bit of healing. We've only got 3 into this. It gives us a little life steal. Conflux. I mentioned this. We have it on our comm. Basically, anytime Amara applies a status effect on an enemy, she gains a chance to randomly also electrocute, ignite, or melt. The extra effect chance is 50%. And the more bullets we fire, you start to see that very quickly we're going to apply all the elements using that, other than radiation and cryo, which we're already picking up from our grenade and our skill tree here inherently. Forceful Expression gives us bonus elemental damage based on our action skill element. This is going to help us again. This is going to be cryo, and you'll see several times that a lot of the enemies end up just freezing, which is kind of cool. I mean, that's not the intent of this build, but they will often turn into blocks of ice.
It's a nice little bonus. It is a nice little bonus, right? It's really good for mobbing, and especially, again, when you're using something like the root that's applying damage all over the place. You'll turn around and enemies that are like all the way across the map are frozen into blocks of ice. I'm not complaining. No reason to. Absolutely.
We're only gonna put 3 into the green tree here into personal space just because it's such a good skill. Basically, Amara's weapon shots deal bonus damage based on the distance to the target. If you get up close, you're going to get 50% additional bonus damage. But even at a far distance, you're getting some bonus damage. So it's always worth it to put 3 into that one. And, if you want, you can play up close, but you don't have to. You'll see you absolutely do not have to. Finally, I put 5 into the purple tree into Heavy Rain. This gives us increased projectile speed, and it gives us 35% additional splash damage. Love the splash damage. These next 3 points are totally flex points. You can put them here. I put them here because I need to get Cold-Hearted, which converts the action skill element to cryo. You can kind of put them in here how you want. Whenever I freeze an enemy, go with the flow is whenever you freeze an enemy, you gain increased movement speed and weapon damage for a short time. I frequently freeze enemies, but I don't always freeze them. So I didn't put as many points here, but the other one I did is Unweave the Rainbow. Amara deals bonus damage of her attuned element, in this case, Cryo, whenever she deals melee damage or splash damage to frozen enemies. Again, this requires me to freeze enemies. I don't always freeze them. I do often, but not always. But I needed to unlock Cold-Hearted so that I can use that root without worrying about killing myself. And that is the action that is the action skill tree. Yeah.
Nice.
So
nice.
It's a fun little skill tree. We're going to show you what this looks like in practice. So we're going to basically work our way. We're halfway through the map on Athenas, and we're going to work our way through the map here. I'm going to switch guns in each section, and then we're going to end with fighting Captain Trant. Mm-hmm. So you'll get to see a little bit of mobbing, and you'll get to see a little bit of bossing. And again, Trant's not the best enemy to test this build on because he's resistant to cryo and incendiary damage. But he'll work. We'll get him dead. And so again, I'm going to... Go ahead.
I was going to say, your strategy for mobbing is, you said you could play up close, but you don't have to. So you're going to play kind of medium, or how are you going to play it?
Yeah, I usually play pretty medium with this build. Although, like, if I'm using the Becca, I'm actually going to play back. But yeah, I mean, if I'm just generally mobbing... I mean, the real trick here is just to try to bind as many enemies as possible, because they're going to get wrecked. Mm-hmm. Now, the shock damage, though, you'll see on the edge of my screen, you see lightning bolts. That's how long you have the bonus shock damage. So it's not just when you have them grasped that you have that. Now we're going to switch to the Becca here. And you'll see when I do the Becca, I am going to play back a little bit, although I guess I don't really have to because the Becca, like, one-shot everybody. The Becca's pretty strong. Just saying. Especially if you hit those crits, man.
Right.
Those crits are...
Do you find hitting crits with it is easy? Because we've always talked about this game really doesn't reward aiming down sights. It's kind of a hip fire kind of game. You find it with Rebecca it's easy to hit crits?
The Becca, I do aim down sights, and the Becca is very stable, and the scope on the Becca is actually not horrible. A lot of times in this game, the scopes suck. Right. The scope on the Becca is not terrible, so it's actually not too bad. And okay. I've been using it aiming down sights because hitting those crits is so valuable. I mean, so valuable. So, for some reason, the enemies didn't spawn in here. Kind of awkward. But we're going to go fight... Oh, man, I hope... Did I already kill Trant in this? Nope, I did not. So we're going to go kill Trant. And here I'm
on him right now.
I'm using the root, and
okay.
I aim down sights with the root just because I want to hit that backpack too. Because man, if you can hit his backpack like that, mm-hmm. he goes boom pretty quick. So I'm aiming down sights with the root. But I don't have to. I mean, I could totally just run around and mob with this thing without aiming down sights. But if you're fighting Trant and his backpack is a giant crit spot, usually worth it. If I were using the Becca on him, same thing. Aim down sights, aim at that backpack, get those crits. He will go down very quickly, even though, again, he is completely resistant to all the cryo damage and any incendiary damage that I do to him.
I noticed that. I was gonna point that out again, how you said it's not the best test, but he's still putting down pretty quickly because of the additional damage you're picking up in other spots.
Well, and he's good in regards to the fact that he does take shock damage. which of course is going to be our biggest damage. And as you and I found out after the last time we did this build, we finished the stream and we decided to go do the Trial of Survival or whatever it was. That was the weekly trial that week. And the enemy, the boss enemy has like 60 gajillion health, right? Like that's just a giant bullet sponge. And I took this build and it turned out that the final boss was shock resistant.
Right.
Well, that sucks. I mean, that basically, I will say, if you're fighting shock resistant enemies, that basically renders this build completely useless, or as close to it as possible. It was funny because we got through to the boss in like, what do you think, like 6 minutes?
Yeah,
I mean,
really,
we
really
tore
quick to get
through
there.
that, tore through the level, just ripped through the level like nothing. Hot knife through butter, and then got to the final boss. And you were running the Zane build you're running right now, which I think is Snow Goblin, and
I'm running Chain Zane.
or you're running Chain Zane, even worse, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you're running Chain Zane, and I'm running this, and it was like we weren't even tickling that final boss.
Nope.
So just word of advice: if you're fighting shock-resistant enemies, this is not the build for you.
So,
But
is there like a minor adjustment you could make that would make it worthwhile with shocked enemies? I mean, or would it just be a whole new revamp on it?
that'd be a different build because the
Okay.
Revolter is the center of this. Yeah.
Gotcha. And you talked about some variations of this build. Was it just the type of guns using, or was it, you talked about the flex points and your skill tree and stuff like that? Was that the variation, or was there something you wanted to kind of show off real fast as far as variation, or was it just the gear that you kind of talked about already?
I don't have anything to show off other than to say, that if you were bossing or if you just prefer it, you could run phase cast. And if you run phase cast, then again, you'd want to run weapons with this anointment. After using phase cast, weapon damage is increased by 250% for a short time.
Damn, yeah, you do.
And short time, by the way, in Borderlands 3 is like 9.5 seconds. So
Gotcha. Okay.
I would only put the phase cast on if I was bossing. And even then, phase cast does not come back as quickly as phase grasp. So you may have some lapses in terms of not always having that shock damage up. So I really like the grasp, the ties that bind, but some people really love their phase cast and totally support that. So you would basically just replace every weapon with the phase cast version of it. And
Okay.
other than that, I mean, there's not really any other particular variation. Again, you can run whatever guns you want to run. You can totally run. If you're going to run grasp, if it is a splash weapon, I would run with ASC Splash 200. If it is a non-splash weapon, then I would run with next to mags. And again, you can pick like whatever you're fighting should dictate the next two mags that you want to run. If you're fighting human enemies, flesh, enemies with flesh, then it would be incendiary. If you're fighting robots, then it would be corrosive. If you want some just general additional mobbing prowess, you could run additional radiation damage on the next two mags. And then maybe you want to change out the grenade to something other than radiation, because that's where I'm already picking that up. But, whole bunch of different ways you can configure it, Negan. No, I mean, there's a right and wrong skill tree, I suppose, to some extent, other than those flux points. But, I mean, other than that, it's a pretty flexible build. It really is a pretty flexible build.
Good. It's good to have those. Good to have kind of, one of those types of builds in your repertoire.
Yeah, and it's a fun build to play with. It's a very fun build to play with. And it tears through takedowns. I mean, it just absolutely shreds through the takedowns, where, of course, shock damage and corrosive damage is so valuable.
And the phase grasping with the different mobs and stuff like that, definitely advantageous as far as that goes as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Totally makes sense. All right. Well, nice build. I like it.
Thanks.
If I ran Amara more, I'd probably run it, but I don't run Amara, so for whatever reason, I've yet to tune up an Amara.
I will say that you are missing out.
Yes, we say it every time. That's what people tell me.
Yeah. How's your blonde ale treating you?
Blood Ale's treating me good. Treating me good. It's almost gone, and I think I have another one that I will be opening up here in a little bit. So it's really good. So over the Rubicon by Shadow Puppet. It's very refreshing. It's kind of sweet. It's got almost got like a sweet tart kind of note to it. So
Okay.
that's kind of interesting, and it's good. I like sweet tarts, so it actually works out well for me. But no, it's really good. How about yours? How'd the cider work for you?
I really like it, man. It's definitely not a super heavy hitter, and it tastes like
It's like
apple juice, but stronger. I don't know. I've not had a cider in years. This one's pretty dry, which I like. I would not want it any sweeter than this. It's pretty good and dry, which I like it. So
Gotcha.
yeah, it's good.
And you like apples, so as far as like from an apple liker perspective, it's actually a good cider too. So it doesn't.
I love apples. I eat several apples a day every day. And so yeah, man, it's got a good apple flavor to it.
Good. Glad to hear it. Yeah, they do some good ciders. Even their berry ciders. I know you said you're not into the berry ciders, but even their berry ciders are pretty good. So, but all right.
All right. I'll take your word for that one.
Yes. Take my word for it. Not gonna twist your arm and make you drink one. It's all good. Yeah, freedom of choice,
man.
my friend. Freedom of choice.
Well,
right,
we want to keep it. I want to keep this short, so we're right at about 40 minutes. So anyway, again, 1.21 gigawatt Amara. Hope you'll check it out, and also just want to give a quick shout out to Tri Balmer from our Discord, Angelic and Beastly Creatures, because he hooked me up with all this stuff. He's like my Borderlands 3 sugar daddy, the nicest guy in the world, and he's great at crafting this stuff, PC crafting the gear for this. So I appreciate him a lot, and appreciate all the people from our Discord. Again, that's Angelic and Beastly Creatures Discord. So if you're looking for a good Discord, you can come and check us out. We do a lot of giveaways and build giveaways and that type of stuff as well. So
Yeah, we do. Definitely. I just put a link in chat for it as well.
yeah, cool. Thank you. And also, as always, Negan, thank you for all your hard work on our editing and video production stuff. So appreciate you as well.
Well, thanks, Burt. Good job on the build. Good job on introducing it and talking about it and all the details. And to everybody else out there, see ya.